Misty Valley Cooperative presents When We Were Gone Astray. The paths of the world twist and turn. They divide and converge, taking you to unexpected places. Welcome to the haunted town of Assembly, and to the strange lands around it. The days are growing shorter, and the nights are chill. So put another log on the fire. Find a comfortable chair. Sit back. Relax. Listen. Chapter 16. Perichoresis. "We have to figure this out," said Fletch. "I know. We can't keep avoiding each other. Dad and Doc keep telling me I'm not two people. Maybe I do exist in different places. Maybe I'm even dead and alive at the same time, but still, it's just me. It's always been just me." "It's taken a while for me to accept that," Silver confessed. "But I've come a long way since this morning." All during the day, Fletch tried to find a few moments to be alone with Silver, but they were always in the midst of people, in class or between classes. Fletch knew they had to talk. The space between them was unbearable, but there was no way for him to reach across without drawing even more unwanted attention. At last, at the end of the day, he caught Silver at the door of the gym and pulled him around the corner. "I think I know what's been happening," Fletch said. "Every time you look at me, you see him. You see him lying in that dark place, his throat cut open, and you think he's gone forever." "It's not just that," Silver told him. "It's that I know you're going to go too. Maybe today, maybe next week. I've been doing my best to face that and figure out what I'll do when it happens." "Silver, I'm not gone yet. We're sad and confused, but we have to find a way through this somehow. And we have to do it together." "You know, you can be very convincing sometimes," said Silver. A smile flickered at the corner of his mouth, and Fletch felt his heart lift. It was a free and thoughtless moment, and such things had become rare between them. It wasn't quite like hope, but it made his burdens easier to bear. They stopped by the co-op and picked up hot soup for Josh, who was keeping vigil at the church until Forby came in for the night. Louise Harper greeted them as they entered, and seeing Silver gave a brief gesture of respect, halfway between a nod and a bow. "Everybody's preparing," Fletch whispered. "You seem already prepared, but I'm not. How can I be?" "Just be there," said Silver. In the dim room beneath the abandoned church, Josh lifted the oil lamp and studied Fletch's face. "You look more lively today," he said, "but not by much. We've been fretting about you, except Forby. He doesn't fret about anything." "I haven't been getting much sleep," Fletch admitted. He went to stand beside the cot. "Is he still the same?" "No change, as far as I can tell. I've been telling him carnival stories, but so far he hasn't cracked a smile." "Are you okay until tonight?" Silver asked him. "Fletch and I can stay if you need a break." "Y'all get home. But you tell your mama I saw Carla Wills at the bait shop this morning. She's put up that picture Liz gave her, right over the counter. Looks real pretty." "I'll tell her." "You made that frame?" "Yes, sir." "It impressed me. That took some skill, boy." "Thanks, Josh." "I've got some tools at the shop, jigsaw, stuff like that, knives for carving. Some of them belong to Cotton. Come by and I'll show you." "I'll do it," Silver told him. "Do you think Josh is lonely?" Fletch asked, as they went out onto Stephen Street. "How could he be lonely? He's got about 38 grandchildren." "My dad says Josh is the only person in assembly that Cotton Wills respected. Maybe Josh misses him." Silver frowned. "I hadn't even thought." "He wants you to come by. The tools are just an excuse." Silver nodded. "I see that now. Fletch, sometimes you read people better than I do." "Maybe, but you're a lot better with critters than I am." Silver nudged him. "You were always my favorite critter." As the evening passed, Fletch stole glances at Silver, examining the lines of his face or the curl of his fingers, trying to discover a meeting place between the familiar and the strange. Once, feeling himself observed, he turned and caught Silver studying him in the same way. In the tenderness of Silver's expression, the present moment merged seamlessly with the past, and Fletch reached out and took his hand. He thought of the kiss in the rain, and could feel it still, the shock of it, and the need it had awakened. "I'm in love with him," he realized. "So much is strange, but this doesn't feel strange at all." Fletch needed answers, the kind which could only come from spending time alone, and on Thursday, while Silver met with Betsy after school, he took the boat onto the lake. Without notifying his father, he slipped out, taking his cane pole just in case. He followed the edge of the shore, scanning the overhanging banks, until he noticed a shadowed hollow in the curve of a small inlet. Curious, he turned the boat toward it. The mud of the bank had been sculpted, smoothed and shaped in odd patterns, which would have been invisible to anyone standing in the woods above. As he drew up, he saw that bits of quartz had been pressed into the clay, and he knew he had found one of Nellie's dens. He called to her, but received no reply. No sound came from within the dimness of the little hollow. A small basket woven of marsh reeds hung from a mass of tangled roots above the entrance, and Fletch reached up, removing a white stone from the bed of moss within. The stone, slightly smaller than his hand, had been shaped into an edged and pointed tool. Had Nellie found it in the forest, he wondered, or perhaps even made it herself? He imagined her swimming among clouds of silt at the bottom of the deep lake, exploring the rotten hulls of sunken boats, gathering trinkets for her dens. Feeling as if he'd been trespassing, Fletch returned the stone tool to the reed basket and pulled away from the bank. Beyond the lake, dampness made the forest quiet, as if it were leaning into sleep. As he walked, Fletch kept an eye out for animals, but saw none save for a single squirrel which took no notice of him. A few jays argued somewhere in the trees above. The bramble hedging the labyrinth had thinned during the autumn, but the path itself appeared unchanged. So much had happened here, he thought, and the encounters had been unpredictable. His first glimpse of Silver during the summer, when she had seemed wild and scarcely human. The visitation from John the Conqueror on the Billygoat Bridge, halfway between dream and waking. Cotton Wills, coming to meet his own death, and to pass his burden into Fletcher's care. Who will be waiting this time, he wondered. Who am I supposed to meet? He reached the center of the clearing and stood for a moment in the brown grass. He turned in a slow circle and scanned the surrounding trees. Closing his eyes, he breathed deeply, emptying himself. He waited. The clearing was alive, and he was alive within it. The forest around him was alive, and the world outside. Beyond the world lay the world's end, and life was there as well. He knew then the one he had come to meet, and the one he had found here waiting. "What did you do at Betsy's?" he asked Silver later. "I learned about the end of the world." "I've been there," Fletch told him with a nod. It's closer than you'd think." They had supper that night at the Pastorium. Afterwards, Mark stood up, stretched wearily, and began hunting for his keys. "Are you going to stay with him?" Fletch asked. "Yes, Doc has been there since early this afternoon. He needs to get home. I'll stay until Josh comes tomorrow." "May I come with you?" Liz asked. "I think I'll be all right." "I know, but I'd like to come. Silver can stay here with Fletch and drive him to school." Mark gave in. "Do you want to take the bug in case you get tired?" "No, let's go together." "All right." Mark looked the three of them over. "We do make an odd bunch, don't we?" Liz stood up, helping Fletch collect the plates. "I think we're pretty normal. It's the rest of the world that's strange." Fletch watched the taillights of the station wagon moving away toward Winder. "They could tell we wanted to be alone," he said, "and they didn't hassle us about it." "I don't think they will," said Silver. "They're coping pretty well, but they don't quite fathom us." "I don't quite fathom us," Fletch admitted. "Your dad helped me understand part of it," said Silver. "He told me something last week, trying to comfort me when I was hurting so badly, and there was a word he used which I didn't know. He said, 'You and I share perichoresis.' It sounds dangerous. What does it mean?" "It means we dance around each other, and the dance makes us into one person. He said he thinks you and I were born together from God's kiss, from God's breath." Fletch stared at him. "My father said that." "Something like that, anyway. I don't remember it exactly." Fletch took a log from the porch and carried it to the parlor fire, prodding it into place with the poker. He pushed off his sneakers and warmed his feet on the hearth, taking a book by William Faulkner from the stack beside the fire tools. "It's so strange that Dwight gave you these. He must have known you were into Faulkner. I never thought he even read books." "He's smarter than people think. He's just hateful sometimes. Cotton didn't make life easy for him." "Are you sleepy?" Fletch asked. "Do you want me to read to you?" Silver spread out the books. "How about The Reivers? That one's supposed to be funny. Then what I'd really like to do is carry you up those stairs." "On second thought," said Fletch, "I guess we could read later, like tomorrow or the day after." Silver rolled over and pinned him to the floor. Fletch looked up at him, his heart quickening. Silver looked strange and fierce in the firelight, and Fletch was suddenly astonished at the world in which he found himself. "I don't think we're going to make it upstairs," he whispered. Silver spoke his name against his ear, his throat, his shoulder, and something began to happen for which Fletch was unprepared. He discovered that in the dimness of the firelight, each word or touch or movement created patterns in the air about them, visible and tangible. By following the patterns, they moved together more and more perfectly, until they closed into a singleness of being, a living delight in each other. It was too vibrant to sustain, and it quickly broke apart, leaving only small, bright reflections. But the memory of it remained with him for a long while. Two more days. "I don't really pray, you know," Liz told Mark. "But sometimes I'm in awe of things, all the wonderful magnificence of things, and it makes me feel like everything is turned on its head. Especially lately." Mark nodded. The room was cold in spite of the heater. The bricks of the walls and ceiling were damp to the touch. "I think I know what you mean. It's as if we expect things, and then the opposite falls down out of heaven as if it had a right to be here all along." He took her hand. "It won't be long now. 2 more days. Are you feeling okay about it?" "No, I'm terrified." "Well, at least you've got some sense. You know, I think it's a horror, a complete horror. Does Silver think he's ready?" "It's hard to tell, but he's determined. I know it's asking a lot, but will you go with us?" "Of course, Liz. I love you, and I love Silver. He's never really had a father. To be honest, I never thought he needed one." "Well, he had the benefit of an extraordinary mother." Liz leaned against him slightly as they stood looking down at the pale figure beneath the blanket on the cot. "You know, if we stick together long enough, our family dynamics are going to be pretty peculiar. Isn't there some rule against that in the Bible? How you can't marry your son's boyfriend's father or something like that?" "I think it does require a special dispensation," Mark told her. "Who from, the Pope?" Mark shrugged. "The Justice of the Peace." Confrontation. Nellie Avery knew all the waterways within 30 miles of Assembly, but highways were a mystery to her. The only thing she was sure of was that automobiles moved very fast and then stayed still for a very long time. She waited, and at last this one began to move. The man and the woman had no idea she was there. They talked softly. Most of what they talked about was strange, but some of it was familiar. They loved the red boy and the silver boy, and they loved each other. Nellie loved Betsy, and she loved Susanna, but she was beginning to find these other people interesting as well. For so many years, human beings had only been shadows that moved. The automobile traveled across the river and well into the next town before it slowed and stopped. The man and the woman got out and walked across the street to the tall building on the other side. She waited until they were gone. Nellie slipped over the top of the back seat and sat for a moment completely still, but vigilant, scanning the empty street. The bright green glow from a box overhead turned yellow, then red, then green again. She watched it, fascinated, but the sequence never varied. She opened the door of the automobile and slid out into the cold night. She breathed in the air, trying to sense which odors would be the most promising to follow, and she listened. The distance was considerable, especially since there were no streams to follow, but she was strong, and the darkness would conceal her. After a few minutes, she crept to the foundation of the nearest building. The pole at the front bore a striped flag, just like the one in Assembly, and Nellie found this encouraging. She followed the line of a hedge until it ended. She crossed an open space between silent automobiles, found another street, and followed it until she came to the rails where the locomotive ran. These rails would lead her to the place she wanted to find. Nellie reached Talmadge Memorial long before dawn. At that hour, the entrance was locked, but a door at the rear was propped open by a tall cylinder from which an odor of smoke arose. She slipped inside and crouched behind a bin filled with laundry. The halls were dimly lit, but before long she detected the shimmering form of Crowther Wills in the darkness beyond one of the doors. He lay in a metal bed, watching her as she approached. "Bad hat?" He shook his head. "Gave it away." Crowther clutched a dangling box, and the bed slowly rose, allowing him to sit up. With a gesture, he offered her a chair. She drew out the knife she had brought. "Mumblety peg?" He looked at her warily. "Played it once or twice." Nellie climbed onto a tall stool, placing the knife on the tray table between them. She noticed a purple carton with a small bent straw. "Grape juice." Crowther nodded. Nellie studied the other items on the tray, and her eyes settled on the package of crackers wrapped in cellophane. "Fish cookie?" Crowther shook his head. "No, but I reckon they'll do." She watched as he opened the package, arranged the crackers on the tray. "We made a good pair, hunting in the fields," he told her. "You ate, and I traveled, and I took all the blame." Nellie took the cracker he offered and bit into it, then nodded her approval. "You know I had to do away with you. I hope you aren't resentful." He poured a cup of juice. Nellie took it, sipped it cautiously. "Set traps everywhere, all over the bottomlands, but you were wise to them. Now I'm the one in the trap." He studied the knife which lay between them. "I suppose you'll be taking the best part, as usual?" Nellie only grinned. When We Were Gone Astray is produced by Misty Valley Cooperative. It is the second book of the Forked Ways. The text and audiobook are copyright 2022 by Beau Farr. All rights reserved.